Before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. What started as an attempt to embarrass a waitress turned into an unforgettable moment that left everyone in awe and humbled a proud millionaire. You'll be amazed at how she used nothing but her talent to completely flip the situation. On a warm Friday evening, the atmosphere at the Meridian, a posh restaurant in Charleston, South Carolina, was alive with conversation. The clinking of glasses, the soft shuffle of waitstaff, and a distant jazz tune from a corner piano set a refined mood for the night. Kendra, a 25-year-old waitress with a quiet yet determined nature, gracefully navigated between tables, balancing plates and offering smiles. To most customers, she was simply another staff member, but inside, she harbored dreams far beyond the luxurious setting she worked in. Kendra's true passion wasn't serving food, it was music. Ever since she was a child, the piano had been her escape, a place where she could express all of her emotions. But dreams don't pay the bills, and long hours at the Meridian were necessary to fund her aspirations of attending a prestigious music school one day. Only a few people knew of her musical talent, including the restaurant staff who occasionally caught her playing the old piano during her breaks. That evening, as the dinner rush started to quiet, the door swung open, and in walked Bernard Norley. Immediately recognizable, Bernard made an entrance that commanded attention. Surrounded by polished associates, he exuded arrogance. Known for his sharp tongue and love for causing drama, his presence made even the most seasoned staff members stand a little taller. Kendra's co-workers exchanged looks. Bernard was a difficult customer, the kind who relished pushing people's buttons. For Kendra, however, he was just another customer on a long shift. Little did she know, this night would be anything but ordinary. As Bernard surveyed the room, his gaze landed on Kendra. Something about her caught his attention, a brief pause followed by a smirk. Kendra felt his stare but chose to ignore it, focusing instead on her work. Bernard, however, had already decided she would be his source of amusement for the evening. Kendra had grown up in a small town in Georgia, where dreams of greatness often seemed as distant as the stars. Her mother, a single nurse working double shifts, did everything she could to support her children. Despite their modest means, music was always present in their home. A battered piano from a neighbor and her mother's old vinyl records sparked Kendra's love for music. While other kids played outside, Kendra spent countless hours teaching herself to play, mimicking radio songs and eventually tackling classical pieces from secondhand sheet music. Kendra's talent had always been noticed. She played at church, school events, and local gatherings, but recognition couldn't ease the financial challenges standing in the way of her dreams. By the time she turned 18, it was clear that a professional music career would have to wait. Scholarships never came through, and family responsibilities took precedence. Kendra set aside her concert aspirations, focusing instead on earning a living. However, she never gave up her love for music. The piano remained a part of her, always waiting for the right moment to return. A few years ago, Kendra moved to Charleston and sought out a job at the Meridian, not just for the pay, but because of the grand piano tucked in a corner of the restaurant. While she rarely had time to play, the piano brought her comfort, reminding her that music was never far away. That evening, as Bernard and his entourage settled in, Kendra approached their table with a tray in hand, her movements graceful. Bernard ordered a top-shelf whiskey and cracked a loud joke that made nearby diners take notice. Kendra offered a polite smile, her voice steady despite the strange energy he radiated. "Kendra, huh?" Bernard said, eyeing her name tag. "Sounds like someone with hidden talents." Surprised, Kendra nodded and moved on to deliver their orders, unaware of the knowing grin Bernard exchanged with his companions, or the way his eyes followed her every move. What Kendra didn't realize was that Bernard wasn't just watching. He was plotting, and she was about to become the star of a spectacle she hadn't asked for. The night continued as usual, filled with laughter and clinking silverware. Kendra kept her focus, avoiding Bernard's gaze as she moved between tables. She had dealt with difficult customers before, but something about him felt different. He wasn't just rude, he was calculating, and his presence made her uneasy in a way she couldn't explain. By the time the appetizers arrived, Bernard had already begun his performance, though not the kind Kendra expected. He bragged loudly about his success, tossing insults at those he deemed lacking ambition. His companions laughed obediently, while other diners shot annoyed glances his way. When Kendra returned to their table with a bottle of wine, Bernard caught her off guard with another question. "Tell me, Kendra," he asked, his voice cutting through the noise, "what do you do when you're not carrying trays?" A young woman like you must have big dreams. His words froze her in place. She hesitated before responding. I play piano sometimes, keeping her answer short. Bernard's eyes gleamed with interest, a sly smile forming on his lips. A pianist, huh? How interesting. Why don't you give us a little performance? Kendra froze. The room seemed to fall silent, the weight of his challenge hanging heavily in the air. Oh, I couldn't, she said quickly, offering a nervous laugh. I'm just here to work tonight. But Bernard wasn't about to let it go. Nonsense, he declared loudly enough for everyone to hear. There's a piano right there in the corner. Show us what you've got. Someone with your potential isn't shy in front of a crowd. His companions laughed, clearly enjoying the drama, while other patrons turned their heads, curious about the unfolding spectacle. Kendra's chest tightened, the weight of their stares and silent judgment pressing down on her. She wanted to refuse, to walk away, but Bernard's challenge hung in the air like a dare, forcing her to decide, accept or back down. I really shouldn't, she stammered, glancing around for support, but even her co-workers seemed hesitant to intervene. Bernard leaned back in his chair, sipping his whiskey with a smug expression. Ah, I see, he mocked. All talk, no talent. How disappointing. His words stung like a slap. Kendra's hands clenched at her sides. She wasn't one to seek conflict, but the way he dismissed her, it hurt more than she expected. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Don't let anyone make you feel small, Kendra. You're more than they'll ever understand. A heavy silence filled the space between them. Kendra glanced at the piano, then back at Bernard. His smug grin dared her to take the bait, and against her better judgment, she did. Fine, she said, her voice steady but low. I'll play. The room held its breath as Kendra walked toward the piano, each step filled with a mix of fear and defiance. The chandelier above cast a soft spotlight on her, separating her from the murmurs of the crowd. Her fingers trembled as she settled on the bench, the keys before her gleaming like a challenge. Behind her, Bernard leaned back, clearly pleased with himself, as if he had already won whatever game he was playing. Kendra closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Her heart pounded in her chest. This wasn't a local recital, it was different, more hostile. But there was no turning back now. She placed her hands on the keys. The first notes were soft, hesitant, fragile. A few diners shifted in their seats, someone coughed. But Kendra ignored them, focusing as the music began to take shape. She played Clair de Lune by Debussy, a piece she knew by heart. The music filled the room, delicate yet powerful, flowing through the air like a thread binding the silence. As her confidence grew, so did the music. Her hands moved with a grace that contrasted the storm inside her, each note a secret finally set free. Each note Kendra played carried a piece of her journey. The sacrifices her mother had made, the countless hours of practice in a cramped apartment, and the weight of dreams delayed but never forgotten. As she played, the room grew quiet, the chatter fading into a collective stillness. Even Bernard, who had been murmuring to his companions, fell silent. Kendra didn't need to look at him to feel the shift in the atmosphere. The mocking energy that had once surrounded her disappeared, replaced by something she couldn't quite define. Perhaps awe, perhaps humility. The music soared, and Kendra surrendered to it. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't just a waitress or a dreamer. She was simply herself, an artist. Her fingers flew over the keys, each note a vivid expression of emotion, raw and unfiltered. When the final note resonated through the room, there was an eerie silence, as if time itself had paused. Kendra sat still, her hands resting on the keys, unsure of what would happen next. Then, the silence broke as the room erupted into applause. The sound filled the air with warmth and gratitude, overwhelming Kendra in a way she hadn't expected. Some diners stood, clapping enthusiastically, bringing tears to her eyes. Her co-workers, who had been watching, joined in, their faces beaming with pride. Bernard, however, remained seated. His earlier smirk had faded, replaced by an unreadable expression, part surprise, part discomfort. He clapped slowly, his applause faint and lacking the enthusiasm of the others. But even his reluctant applause couldn't diminish Kendra's moment. She had reclaimed her voice, and no amount of arrogance could take that from her. As the applause began to subside, Kendra rose slowly, her knees shaking but her posture firm. She scanned the room, meeting the eyes of the diners who had clapped the most, offering them a small, polite nod. It wasn't pride she felt, but relief, the relief of having faced her fear and not let it silence her. Then, her gaze was drawn to Bernard. He was still sitting, hands folded in front of him, his smug expression replaced by forced neutrality. It was clear he wasn't sure whether to admit his mistake or double down on his arrogance. "Well," Bernard finally spoke, his voice louder than necessary, breaking the tension in the room. "That was unexpected." He chuckled softly, though it lacked its usual self-assurance. "I guess talent really does come from the most unexpected places." The words landed flatly, and his companions exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to react. Kendra tilted her head, observing him. His comment was meant to sound conciliatory, but it felt insincere, as if he couldn't truly accept the moment. "Thank you," Kendra said calmly. There was no warmth in her voice, but there was no hostility either. She wasn't going to let him drag her back into the smallness he'd tried to impose. Her performance had already spoken louder than anything she could say. Bernard cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable under the room's gaze. He gestured for another drink, trying to regain his composure. "You've got quite the gift," he said, almost begrudgingly. Kendra nodded once, her gaze steady. "Everyone has a gift," she replied. "It's how you choose to use it that matters." The room paused once again, the subtle sting of her words hanging in the air. It wasn't loud or confrontational, but it was impactful. Bernard shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confidence slipping with every second. The diners slowly returned to their meals, but the energy in the room had shifted. What had once been an air of privilege and arrogance now held a deeper recognition, a shared respect for the waitress who had reminded everyone of the value of authenticity. But Bernard wasn't just embarrassed, he was exposed. No charm could hide the truth now. Kendra moved away from the piano, the weight of the moment settling in her chest. Her co-workers greeted her with approving smiles as she returned to her station. She still had work to do, but she felt a shift inside her. Her movements were more assured, her posture straighter. Bernard's table had quieted down. His group, who had laughed at her earlier, now avoided eye contact. The once confident air around them had evaporated, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. The night continued, but Kendra felt lighter. Every step she took was more purposeful, her confidence blossoming in ways she hadn't anticipated. As she refilled glasses and cleared plates, patrons stopped her to offer kind words. "You're amazing," one older woman said softly, after Kendra set down a coffee cup. "I've never heard anything so moving." "Keep going," another man encouraged. "You've got something special. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." Kendra thanked them with quiet humility, her heart swelling with gratitude. These weren't just compliments, they were affirmations of everything she had worked for, everything she had dreamed of becoming. Bernard, however, wasn't as gracious. When Kendra approached his table to deliver the check, he looked at her with a mixture of annoyance and reluctant admiration. "You've made your point," he said, his tone sharp. "No need to rub it in." Kendra met his gaze, her voice calm yet firm. "It was never about proving anything to you," she said. "I just wanted to play." Bernard had no reply, fiddling with his drink, his former confidence now replaced by an awkward shuffle. The balance of power had shifted entirely, and it was clear to everyone at the table. As he signed the check, one of his companions, a younger man with a gentler demeanor, turned to Kendra and said, "You were incredible." Truly. The sincerity in his voice surprised her, and for a moment, she saw a glimpse of humanity in a group she'd assumed to be superficial. "Thank you," Kendra said, offering a small smile before walking away. The night ended with Bernard and his group leaving quietly, their usual dramatic exit replaced by a hurried departure. Kendra didn't dwell on their exit or the confrontation. She wasn't focused on Bernard anymore. Her thoughts were on the future. That night's tips were unusually generous, enough to cover her rent, and put aside some for the piano lessons she had been postponing. As she locked up and walked home, the cool air filled her lungs, and she felt something she hadn't in years, certainty. She wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't just a dreamer. She was an artist, and no amount of mockery, financial struggle, or fear could take that away from her. Her mind wasn't on the confrontation anymore. She was thinking about the future, where her dreams felt closer than ever. Back in her modest apartment, Kendra sat on the worn bench at her old piano. The sound wasn't as crisp or rich as the grand piano at La Fontaine, but it didn't matter. The music still came from her heart. Something had changed within her that night. It wasn't just a victory over Bernard. It was the realization that her talent didn't need to be hidden or justified. It was hers, and that was enough. In the days that followed, the events at the restaurant became a local story. Patrons who had witnessed her performance shared the tale, and word spread. A few days later, Kendra received a call from a music producer visiting from Austin. He wasn't offering fame, but a chance to record a demo, a small step towards something she had once only dreamed of. Kendra agreed, not because she believed it would change her life overnight, but because it felt like an opportunity she couldn't ignore. For years, fear and doubt had told her she wasn't enough, and that her dreams were too big. But now she understood the truth. Her resilience and authenticity were her greatest strengths. The incident with Bernard wasn't just a humiliating spectacle turned victory. It was a reminder of the power of staying true to herself. Bernard, with all his wealth and arrogance, had nothing that could diminish her. He embodied every voice of doubt she had ever encountered, and she silenced him with nothing but the purity of her talent. Kendra's message was clear to anyone who witnessed her story: never let someone else define your worth. The world is full of people like Bernard Norley, who project their insecurities onto others to feel powerful. But real strength comes from staying grounded in who you are and letting your passions speak louder than their ridicule. As she closed the piano lid and rested her hands on the worn wood, Kendra smiled. Her journey wasn't over, but for the first time, it felt like it had truly begun. What about you? What dream have you been holding back because of fear or doubt? Don't wait for someone like Bernard to challenge you. Take your step forward now. If Kendra's story inspired you, subscribe for more stories of resilience and triumph. Your story could be next.